Welcome to Conversations with Dr. Skip Mason,
pastor, preacher, historian, author,
teacher, librarian, archivist, world traveler,
collector, family historian, avid reader, and creator of the popular Vanishing Black Atlanta Facebook page.
With a lot of folks who love history.
Most importantly, he's our dad who loves his family and who taught us the importance of our history and having important conversations.
Join him now for this episode of Conversations with Dr. Skip.
Well, good Sunday afternoon, my brothers and sisters across our beloved Zion. I am Skip Mason and delighted to welcome you to another conversation as the Christian Methodist Episcopal Church marches on towards its 150th anniversary, which will take place in December. And so since March, I've had the opportunity, the honor, and the pleasure to have some conversations with some of the wonderful movers and shakers of our Zion, our beloved denomination. And today I am just ecstatic to be able to begin to share with some of the general officers of our church who hold very important roles, but even more so, they are engaged on a daily basis in helping to make our Christian experience, both throughout our church, the denomination, a very worthwhile and engaging one. So I'm excited to be able to share with them and to share them with you today. I need for you to take a moment to host a watch party. Just take your cell phone. If you're looking at your cell phone, and hit the watch party, or if you're on your computer, hit the watch party, and that will share it with the others. We are on a number of pages on Facebook, a number of the denominational pages, as well as YouTube. And I'm just excited that so many of you are enjoying these wonderful conversations. Let me acknowledge, as I always do, our senior bishop, Bishop Lawrence L. Reddick, and his beautiful wife, Sister Wendy Jones Reddick. Let me acknowledge the College of Bishops and all of their spouses. Let me acknowledge particularly Bishop James B. Walker, who is the chair of the CIT committee, Bishop Thomas Lewis Brown Sr., who is the vice chair, and their spouses, and my bishop as well, as I'm a part of the 6th Episcopal District. And let me acknowledge and thank Dr. Teresa Duhard for her continued support of this effort to make sure that this conversation gets out to all of you across the country and across the world. I'm excited that many of our brothers and sisters over in Africa also get an opportunity to tune in and to watch our show. Today's show deals with the general officers. And the discipline says that the connectional program of the Christian Methodist Episcopal Church shall be administered by general officers. The general officers shall be persons holding offices designated by the General Conference. And we are delighted to have 4 of them with us today. And let me bring them up at this time. Delighted to have Dr. Carmichael Crutchfield, Dr. Clifford Harris.
Hello.
Dr. Leo Pinkett, and Reverend Leon Moore. The first,
glad to be with you.
Thank you. The first of our general officers to come and to share with us. First of all, it is a joy to be in your presence and your company, knowing of the great work that each of you do. And today you will get an opportunity to share across our Zion and tell people a little bit about yourself, your journey to this particular office, and just to help us to know what it is you do and how we are impacted by it. So before we came on the air, we were gonna, pull straws to see who would go first, but we decided that out of seniority, that Dr. Carmichael Crutchfield would come, the General Secretary amen, of Christian education and formation would come. But Dr. Harris and Reverend Moore and Dr. Pinkett, don't go anywhere. We'll be back with you very soon. But Dr. Crutchfield, first of all, tell us a little bit about yourself, where you're from, and just kind of give us that background, and then take us forward to how you ended up becoming a general officer of our church.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Mason. And first, let me say thank you for not only the invitation, but the opportunity to share, and to all of my CME colleagues across the world. We're grateful to be part of this. My journey began from church, in a small membership church in Northwest Tennessee called Como, Tennessee. The church is called Bars Chapel, Christian Methodist Episcopal Church. The closest town where CME Church was located was Paris, Tennessee, 10 miles east of that. And Como was one of these places where you drive through and didn't know you drove through it. It's very small membership. I never knew more than 50 to 60 people that were ever a part of the church. But during my tenure there, my father was the Sunday school teacher for adults most of the times that I grew up, most of my life while I was growing up. It was 7 of us children. We participated in Sunday school. My parents took us to Sunday school. And by the age of 14 or 15 years old, I was teaching Sunday school to adults. And then also speaking in the church, doing speeches and all those kinds of things. Being sent to leadership training school, district leadership training schools, the annual conferences from the small membership church out in the country. They invested not only in me, but all of the young people there. And I was part of the CYF. I was just talking in church school this morning about how the formation took place there in church school, where I learned at that early age that to be Christian was to serve people and to love people, and to never look down on people. And from there, I was the first person to go to college out of my family. And I often tell people this, I think I was the first person to go to college from my entire church in its history. So no one was able to tell me much about that. Went to college, I left there, got a job on my way to becoming in my mindset, a CEO of a Fortune 500. I was on my way doing very well in a Fortune 500. But in 1985, I accepted the call to preach. And 3 years later, decided to leave a very lucrative paying job with great benefits to go to seminary as it turned out to be in Memphis. I was assigned to a church 50 miles from there and served there at the church for 5 years, finished seminary in 3 years. And during the time I was in seminary, I was working part-time for then the Dr. Ronald Cunningham, who later, of course, became Bishop Cunningham, working in the Department of Christian Education with him. I had already been attracted to him because while living in Arkansas, my wife and I at the time would drive to Memphis from about 5 or 6 hours to come and help plan youth and young adult conferences. And so when I moved to Memphis area, I quite naturally became a part of his staff. I often call it that I was an adjunct member of his staff, which meant that most of the times I wasn't getting paid. I was there, but it was one of the most valuable experiences of my life to be there with him. He taught me much. He allowed me the opportunities to travel with him across the country, to ride with him, to where he did a lot of driving. I did a lot of driving, and when he went to sleep, which was quite often. And we had a great time, slept in the room with him a lot, talked to him a lot. And when he decided to run for bishop, the first time he decided to run for bishop, I didn't think he was going to win, so I wasn't interested in that. In 1999, I decided to do a doctor of ministry at Memphis Theological Seminary and finished in 2002. People were asking me about running for the office of general officer. I had never given really much thought to it. So in the March of 2002, I decided, with a lot of consultation from my bishop, Bishop William Henry Gray, Dr. Cunningham, in March of 2002, I decided to offer myself for an election that would take place in July 2002. And I was elected by a landslide, and so I've been elected 4 other times since then. So I assume that people have thought that I was doing the work that was necessary, and that's been my journey to this point of being in Christian education. My work, as it turned out, and I always talk about this as a faith journey. I did a D-Min with my work and project around the idea of a model of Christian education based on spiritual formation and discipleship, and with no thoughts of ever doing anything except continuing to be a pastor. But that turned out to be one of the wisest decisions I made, because when I was elected in 2002, much of the work that I do, and it's continued almost 18 years now, has been around spiritual formation and discipleship. And a lot of that work comes out of the work that I did back in a doctoral ministry program between 99 and 2002. Of course, in 2006, I decided to do a PhD and become a professor. It turns out to become a professor at my alma mater at Memphis Theological Seminary. And we'll say more about that. But the emphasis in Christian education, both locally, district-wise, regionally, and connectionally, and even ecumenical circles, has been strong in my life since, I guess, probably 1990.
That's, let me.
Dr. Mason, did you ask me something?
Let me. All right, there we go.
Okay.
As I tell people, I'm the host. I'm also the technical person, the engineer.
Hey, I understand.
Listen, so I'm trying to do all of these things at the same time. But what a tremendous pedigree that you have, and an evolution, if you will, in terms of your engagement and involvement and getting to this great office as the General Secretary of Christian Education. For someone who doesn't know, what is Christian education?
Well, Christian education, in simple terms, is helping people to grow in Christ. And I define it basically is to help people to grow in Christ, help people to be formed in Christ, help people to become disciples of Jesus Christ, and to make disciples of Jesus Christ. And so I think it's one of the most important things that we do in the church. And so I take that very seriously, and everything I do is circular. I tell people everything I do is for the upward of the local church.
So out of your department comes literature, yes, that the church uses. Would you talk a little bit about that, please? Absolutely.
Be happy to. I'm going to begin with saying a word about Advent devotionals. Advent devotionals is as I said about being ecumenical, the AME Church, the AME Zion Church, and the CME Church for a long time, all the time since I have been General Secretary, we have produced together an Advent devotional, of course, and we've asked different people from across the country to be writers for Advent. This year, general officers and 2 bishops are the ones who are the writers for this Advent. We share that through people who purchase that, and all you have to do is call my office and ask for it. That's the first thing I'll mention. I'll mention some other literature as well. One of the things that I'm, I guess, most proud of, because it comes out of the work that I've been doing for quite some time, is a discipleship curriculum, and that begins that book that's on the screen. It's all about discipleship. Is a book that I wrote near the end, or right at General Conference. As a matter of fact, Bishop Best refers to this book, made reference to this book in his Episcopal address, and encouraged or asked the church to purchase this book. It's the fourth in a series of books, the one being the membership manual, which is the beginning of what I call discipleship curriculum. That's Discipleship 101. Then there's a Discipleship 201. There is a book called Discipleship 201. And then there is a book called Discipleship 301, which has to do with 21st century discipleship. All three of those, plus that last book that I have, that was posted on the screen, make up what I call a discipleship curriculum. And I have for the last 2 years, where I pastor until the pandemic, for the last 2 years, that has been the curriculum that I have used at Mother Liberty, and it has lasted that long to use it using that particular curriculum. That is one piece. Two pieces. Of course, what we've been doing during this pandemic is to be more doing some virtual things. We've put Sunday school, Sunday's church school in motion in a virtual way, and we see there the outlines that are produced, and then a video is produced each week, and a PowerPoint with that video, and that's used for people to inspire people to continue church school during this pandemic, and it's sort of a kicking off point for people to use in Sunday church school. A second piece that we've been doing during this pandemic is an ecumenical Bible study on Wednesdays from noon to 1 every Wednesday. And thank God, every Wednesday since the middle of March or so, I have been able, and the Lord has kept me able to be able to teach that lesson each Wednesday, even in the midst of other meetings sometimes. But God has been good and allowed that to happen. And those lessons have centered around spiritual formation. And that's been the emphasis of that. And then those two virtual pieces. Then we have a piece called The Practitioner that we do quarterly, that is done to try to inspire and encourage and share with the connection different parts of Christian education and how Christian education is defined and used in different ways. It's just this small, narrow way of thinking of Christian education as Sunday church school. So that practitioner happens every quarter, and we encourage writers to participate in that, share their what they have to do. And lastly, I want to, and of course we do, the CYYAC, the Connection Young Adult Conference, the big conference. And I left this last because I always want to let people know that I just don't sit around for 4 years and wait for Connection to Youth and Young Adult Conference to come and start working. We have much work to do in the meantime. And but the last thing I do want to say, in the interest of time, is to say that if you could, Dr. Mason, flash up the book, The Formation of a People, Christian Education in the African American Church, through Judson Press. This is available and through all your local bookstores, and will be in the Miles bookstore in Memphis. So you can purchase it from the CME Church. This is a work that I've been working on for a while, and in the next 18 months or so, you'll be hopefully seeing another book about the formation of African American youth in the African American Church, and that should come out probably in the spring of 2022. I'm working on that now, and that's in a nutshell, Dr. Mason, what I do.
Well, all I can say after that is, whoo, my goodness, you have been busy, and the fruit of your work is evident by the literature that we receive constantly. Dr. Crutchfield, I appreciate you. I'm looking forward to your book, The Formation, and certainly if the foreword was written by Dr. Wimberly, one of the great professors at ITC, amen, that we know that it is going to be a continued masterpiece. Well, thank you for sharing. Don't go anywhere, because we're coming back now, and we appreciate your helping us to understand. And all churches should have a board of Christian education.
Thank you.
And a director of Christian education. And what I'll do before we leave, I'll ask you to comment about the importance of a well-functioned board of Christian education and how important that is to the vitality of the church. So we'll get back to you. Dr. Harris, glad to have you with us. And I want to make sure that, yes, good to have you, sir. Our General Secretary of Lay Ministry. And won't you just tell us a little bit about your story, your journey to the position that you currently hold and some of the work that you have been doing with that?
Okay, thank you, Dr. Mason. We're very appreciative for the opportunity to share with you and with all of our CME family across the Zion today. My journey began many years ago, and I would put it this way: only God knows what is in store for us as we live our lives from infancy up to this point. But somewhat like Dr. Crutchfield, I began in a very small church, rural church called Petty Chapel, CME Church, south of Tulsa, Oklahoma, a little community called Bixby. And if you got very, very specific, just like many other individuals within our church and across the world, I was from a little place called Snake Creek, Oklahoma. And we, as children, there were 6 of us, and my mother and father took us to church each and every Sunday. My father is a retired CME preacher, actually the presiding elder. He was in the ministry some 42 years and 18 years as a presiding elder. He's presently living still at the age of 98. And so we're thankful for what he meant to us and what he continues to mean. But during my upbringing, much of my early experiences were in Sunday school. And I had a wonderful Sunday school teacher by the name of Miss Minnie Goff. And she taught us in such a way that we learned to appreciate and love God in unconditional ways. And I sometimes think about the example that she set from the standpoint that she had a number of children herself. Mm-hmm. But if we could emulate anything that she did, it would be to make everyone feel like that they are special. And that's the way she made us feel. During my formative years, as we go forward, I went to school at a all-black school, elementary school called W.T. Vernon. And then my father moved us out of that district because he didn't want us to ride 25 or 30 miles past the school that we could have gone to. And we went to an integrated school. I graduated from that school, went on to college, received a bachelor's and a master's degree from Central State University in Edmond, Oklahoma. And during that time, I became a member of the Greater Cleve CME Church in Oklahoma City, where most of my adult years were spent. I taught school for several years, and then I was a guidance counselor. And after that, I worked for the Department of Career and Technology Education. I'm very thankful for the opportunity that I had as a career, as an educator. And during that time, and up until now, of course, always active in the CME Church. And my road to becoming a general officer, I guess, began even before I knew it. Dr. I. Carlton Falk used to come to our conference every year and encourage and visit us during annual conference. And of course, persons in positions such as that, during that time, we never think of ourselves as being able to hold such a position. But I had individuals in my life who saw things in me that I did not see in myself.
Yes.
One of those persons was Brother Adolph Brown, who was a lay leader in the Oklahoma region. And he always encouraged me to stay involved in lay ministry. As we continue to go to leadership training schools, go to the various meetings that were held around the church, then opportunities presented themselves to us. We were elected the president of the Connectional Lay Council in December of 1995, and we served for 4 years. And in 2010, was elected the General Secretary of the Lay Ministry. That was something that I wasn't sure if I should pursue, but as God does in many cases, He gives us confirmation in relation to what it is that we might be pursuing or what it is that we might have on our minds to do. And the prayer of Jabez kept appearing in my life. A friend of mine gave me a book that talked about that prayer. My wife was in the hospital at one time, and I went to the gift store, and there the prayer of Jabez was imprinted and framed. And as I did my work around the state of Oklahoma, I went in a small gift shop one day, and there again was the prayer of Jabez. And if you know what the prayer of Jabez talks about, enlarging one's territory. And so as I pursued the thought, I say pursued the thought because I wasn't pursuing the office at that point. I was pursuing the thought of placing myself in a position to run for the office. As we made that determination, we were successful in our bid to become the General Secretary of Lay Ministry for the CME Church. And since that time, we have been re-elected 2 times unopposed. And when I came to the office, I wanted to be sure that we carried on what I thought should be the work of lay ministry in the CME Church. And that is to reach, teach, and minister to all generations, equipping them for greater works and service for Him. And that means having a sensitivity and a regard for everyone within the church, everyone that we encounter in some ways is different. And in the world in which we live today, we have various generations within our church. And I think that we must be sensitive to each generation and be careful that whatever we do, that we provide an opportunity for persons to feel empowered, for them to have an opportunity to grow spiritually within our church, and then have the opportunity to move forward if they want to hold offices within the church. It's very challenging, and we might get into the discussion later on, but this pandemic is going to change the way we do some things. But that has been, but doing the work that we do, we provide a writing each and every month for the Christian Index. We provide updates in the form of from the pen of the General Secretary every 4 to 5 weeks. That's published in the Christian Index, and also that we send out. You mentioned Dr. Duhart, and she is very helpful and beneficial in helping us to communicate the work that we do. We've done various writings, and they are on our website. Um, I believe that anything that a layperson or even a pastor might want to um, access, there's something there that is helpful for all of us. And we're very proud of the work that we do. One of the things that we are very proud of is the fact that our stewards, stewardesses, and usher ministries are under the umbrella at this point of the Department of Lay Ministry. And we have persons who serve as presidents of those connectional ministries. And it is their job to be sure that persons who serve in those ministries at the local church are informed and that they are equipped to do the work in a greater way, maybe than what they have been doing at that particular point. So I'm very proud of what we do in lay ministry, and one of the overlying things that keeps me going and keeps me motivated is the fact that I believe that laity should always have a seat at the table, and that is all. That is the only thing that I asked for when I was running for this office. I asked the Lord to give me a seat at the table so that we can continue to represent lay ministry within the Christian Methodist Episcopal Church and forge greater relationships between laity and the clergy. And if there are times that we have disagreements on how we see things, then if you have a seat at the table, then it's kind of like this, that if you have a pail in your hand and the pail has a dent in it and you want to get the dent out, you can't get the dent out by hitting it from the outside. You have to be on the inside and strike it from the inside, and you might be able to smooth the dent out. And that's the approach that we take. It's not the fact that everything is perfect, but we're there to help smooth things out. Then
Yes.
I believe our church can continue to grow and be the church that it was called to be.
Wow. Thank you. Thank you so much, Dr. Harris. And we all know and value, those of us who are preachers should value the importance of lay and the lay ministry. And I will too come back and ask you similar to help us kind of forecast, going forward, what must the lay continue to do so that our churches are viable and engaging, and particularly during this pandemic and this virtual season that we find ourselves in. Thank you so much, Dr. Harris, and I look forward to coming back with you. All
Yes,
right,
sir.
we are delighted to welcome someone that I've known for a very, very long time. And when I met Dr. Pinkett, he had an afro and I had hair, and I was in high school, and he wasn't in high school. He was a distinguished man in Atlanta. But Dr. Leo Pinkett is the General Secretary of Ministry to Men, and those of us who are old enough, who've been around, we can follow the journey to creating this ministry and Dr. Pinkett's election. Dr. Pinkett, tell us about your journey in the CME Church and your journey to becoming the first General Secretary of the Ministry to Men. And so glad to have you on as well.
Thank you, Dr. Mason. It is a tremendous opportunity that you've given us to express those things that we have on our heart and our mind this evening. I thank you for your ministry. I've watched you develop over the years to even greater standards, and you've proven yourself in so many ways throughout this country. So again, I thank you. But my journey started back in 49 when I was born. as I can recall, the first church I do remember and become a member of as well was Butler Street CME Church in downtown Atlanta, Georgia. We lived about 3.5 blocks away from that church, and at that time, the church itself was a pillar in the community and still is. But we walked every day, every day to church because there was an opportunity for us to attend a YMCA, which was Butler Street YMCA. At the time, we had met attorney Donnelly Hollowell, which was the church's attorney. I just know he was a great baritone singer initially. And at the barbershop that I swept hair in, he was a regular member, a regular attendee. And so was so many great individuals here in Atlanta. But as a child, I was involved in the church Sunday school, vacation Bible school, and I watched these giants of men, Senator Tate, Don Hollowell, Curtis Atkinson, the first secretary, Black Secretary of State, Miss Addie Sloan. I even remember Pastor Delaney, because his mother, Reverend Dr. Christina Delaney, was one of our associate pastors at the time, which I found to be exceptional because during that time period, women wasn't allowed in the pulpit. But at that time here at Butler Street, she was an associate minister there. And the journey was an expectation to do great things because these individuals pour into the young people, had a strong youth department. You couldn't do anything wrong because somehow without cell phones or technology like we have today, word always got back home before you got there. And I was guided to do the right thing as much as possible. But under the influence of these gentlemen, I was influenced to stay on track. Even though I was not let's just say I was a rascal at the time. But all of our ministers kept seeing things in me that I didn't know I possessed. And over the years, they gravitated towards pulling me into so many different opportunities that I gravitated to our lay ministry. And couldn't sing, still can't hold a note. Tried the choir, but I would always be told by my music instructor in high school to sit next to him. And I thought I had impressed him in such a way in the 8th grade that he was going to let me sing a solo. So when I asked him, Dr. Baker, when will it be my turn? He said, your turn is every day sitting here with me, just listening. And I knew then that the choir wasn't going to be the thing for me. But I went to a lay fellowship breakfast at Shai Temple in Atlanta, Georgia, in the late, I would say 65. And saw all of these brothers at the table fellowshipping and talking about things that impact our community. And I kept attending. Matter of fact, I attended most of the lay meetings, all of the missionary meetings, because when I became of age, Sister Sloan made me drive the van or the car. And I was exposed a great deal to different individuals in our church. Once I graduated from Archer High School here in Atlanta, Georgia, I attended Morehouse College. That was in '68. And at that time, we were represented with the most outstanding class. I think at that time we had the largest freshman class in the history of the college in '68. But gentlemen like Samuel Jackson and Gordon Joyner and Archie Harris, who's gone on to glory now, and Shinholster, Earl Shinholster, Brother Outlaw. We just managed to maintain a steady flow of growth because of the exposure we had at church as well as on campus. Now, grant you, during this whole period of time, we were still active in our churches, in our lay structure. And we started focusing on men's ministry back in the early 70s. And for approximately about 20 years, we had the opportunity to present before the conference in the form of a resolution, the opportunity to have a department focused primarily on men's ministry. Now, this was probably a 20-year journey. And Dr. Mason, those that were around at the time can remember, each time the resolution came up, it was denied. By that time, I had moved through our local lay ministry, our district lay ministry for 18 years. And then I spent about 16 years as a regional lay leader. And I was asked to come and make a presentation at a youth conference, national youth conference, by Dr. Cunningham. He had came to the church once when they were at Phillips School, and he told me I might need the use of your services and your expertise, because at that time I had entered the financial service arena with Prudential Insurance Company and stayed involved in financial services for some 45 years until I passed the operation on to my nephew, who now runs the company. But going back a ways, the influence that was taking place, I had made a presentation and was well received. I flew out, flew back the same day, and we stayed in contact over the years. And then after becoming a regional lay leader, about 16 years in, Bishop Lakey and the men of Georgia, the 6th Episcopal District, were really serious about getting a department developed. And we worked it. We were in Memphis at the time. The resolution hit the floor and it was stymied. Came back up the next morning, and over the course of that weekend or that week while we were in Memphis, about 6 murders had taken place there in Memphis, all men of all ages. And for some reason, as I talked with Reverend Delaney at the time, who gave me a scripture to read and told us we're going to fight this thing and to make it happen, lo and behold, the church found it the right thing to do, to develop a department that focused primarily on men and young boys, and they're transitioning to better men in society, to become priests of their own home, their own community, and in the world. And probably the shortest interview I've ever had in my life for an opportunity was presented at a caucus once we had gotten a resolution passed. I asked Bishop, I said, man, we're excited. I said, but no thought has gone into the process who's going to lead the operation, who becomes the general officer. He said, by looking me straight in the eye, he said, we're looking at him. And I agreed. I said, well, let's go. And the next day, the election took place. My wife, Dorothy, of now 50 years, was in the audience, but I hadn't had a chance to share with her what had taken place. And when I looked for her, she was out. She had gone shopping with some of the elders' wives. And I was elected landslide-wise and have been serving in the capacity of a general officer for 6 terms, 6 quadrennials, and haven't looked back. But our ministry has crossed a connection, even internationally, where we have departments of ministry to men in every Episcopal district, serving the sole purpose of bringing men to Christ, developing skill sets and leadership qualities, and getting the resources which God has allowed us to have. One thing that we'll never run out of is human capital. And we found that developing these ministries, we're able to pull from so many different areas in support. And that was a picture of my family. And that's our visit to Dr. Crutchfield for our retreat setting, some of the general officers that are present and spouses. And congratulations, Brother Crutchfield, on that new wife, that lovely young lady there. That is a photo of what had transpired the Unity Summit that took place in Atlanta, a flyer of our retreat when we started the virtual areas this March. And we participated in virtual meetings from virtual luncheons, which we just completed last weekend at the Lay Luncheon in Charleston, South Carolina, under the leadership of Elder Manis. And we're continuing to do retreats. We finished this weekend with a 3-day retreat from the 8th Episcopal District, where we did it virtually for 2.5, right at 3 days totally. So our ministry has blossomed, and we're seeing more and more young adults gravitate towards it. Young men are finding Christ in their lives. And our sole purpose is to develop disciples, men of stature, brothers of quality. And our motto is that we will leave no man behind. Brother Skip.
Amen. Thank you. Thank you so much, my colleague in ministry. Dr. Mason is having a little technical difficulty. He did ask me to go ahead and to share with my portion of what brought me, of my journey, and then what brought me to the place or the space that we currently allow to serve along these great women and men in the Christian Methodist Episcopal Church as a general officer. First of all, he says he can hear us, so we're in good hands there. Please pray that he can get back on. I'd like to thank you, Dr. Skip, for the opportunity to share and to be a part of this platform. My journey began as a young child. First thing I would say is all I know is the Christian Methodist Episcopal Church. I was part of, and I was groomed at Fuse Memorial Christian Methodist Episcopal Church in River Rouge, Michigan, 456 Palmerston Street. It was there every Sunday, and I do mean every Sunday, that we were engaged in worship. We were part of the inspirational choir as a team, Bible study on Wednesday. That was our family church. It still is our family church. After getting to a place being baptized in that particular church, and the call of my baptism was one that really spurred on for me the imagery and even the passion for evangelism. So when I was baptized, I was sitting at the back of the pews, or when I heard a call, I was sitting at the back of the pews, right? And me and the other young people sitting back there, pretty much horsing around. And this was during a time where they would come and pull your ear, that if you're chewing gum, you would have to spit your gum out, right? But at this time, I didn't have any gum, just sharing that. However, the preacher, pastor at that time was Reverend W.H. Crenshaw. And while Reverend Crenshaw was preaching, it actually sounded like and looked like he was looking and talking to me. And I began to listen more intently. I began to understand that God had something to say that day, and God had something for me to hear. So at that time, after the sermon, of course, the invitation, I was hesitant to go down. I looked down the aisle, and the aisle looked extremely long. Instead of maybe the 30 feet that it was, it looked like 200 feet. But somehow I managed to walk down the aisle, and the steps that I took seemed like I would never get to the front of the church. My grandmother, Hazel Moe, and my mother, Vivian Moore, joined me down at the altar, or the chancellor rail. I was crying, snot was running, and the more they wiped tears from my eyes, the more I cried. And I didn't understand what was happening, didn't know what was taking place. And this is at 16 years old, remind you. So my journey is based out of passion. It is based out of the work, or that day that God had called me down to that altar. After that was my wilderness years, 7 years of wilderness. I'm talking about complete, utterly wilderness. just any wilderness, just wilderness. But God still had God's hand on me, even in the wilderness years. Mm-hmm. So I found myself going in and out of church, back and forth to Fuse. When I need something from God, guess where I went? I went to the church. I would pray, the people would pray, and back out into the wilderness. But one thing that the church did for me, it birthed in me a foundation or formation and a hunger for Christ. Even in seeing this dualism that I was experiencing as a young person, right? The church and how it operates, the streets and how they operate. So after I went down, the church, the people clapped. I mean, they were excited, they clapping, and afterwards there were pats on the back and congratulations. And at that time, I didn't understand what the congratulations was for, what the pats on the back was for, what happened. Didn't do anything great. But it was also at that time I understood that we had no training program, no place for me to go, no place for me to learn, no place for me to work out this soul salvation. And in this wilderness for these 7 years, God led me back to the church. The only church I knew, the Christian Methodist Episcopal Church, 5th generation, CME, 6th generation Methodist. My great-grandfather, Warner Moore, was a Methodist preacher, CME preacher. But nonetheless, my dad, he was a local preacher at Fuse. But nonetheless, I found myself seeking God even the more in the wilderness. Not such as a Lodabar experience, but it was definitely a wilderness experience. So about my call to ministry at Benson Chapel, Christian Methodist Episcopal Church on the historic north side of Fort Worth, Reverend Lewis Jones was my pastor, called into the ministry. And at that time, it was Dr. Carter. Those two kind of helped shape me to move me in a direction. So I would go at one church in the morning, and then I would be at another church at night. It would be Benson, Carter Metropolitan, Benson, Carter Metropolitan, Carter Metropolitan, Benson. So I did that for a time. And the presiding elder at that time had a wonderful catchphrase that you can't go wrong doing right. And E.F. Williams. And he didn't license me, but he gave me the opportunity to go and to share the gospel as a traveling preacher. So I traveled, preached, traveled. And 2 years later, I found myself pastoring. But before all of that, I would never forget these words. I was standing in the annual conference before then Bishop Marshall Gilmore. And the ironic thing about this experience, standing before Bishop Gilmore, was this particular day, everyone that was on to go up before Bishop Gilmore was late. They were out in the hallway, and he didn't like it. So here I am standing before Bishop Gilmore, and he did not like the fact that everybody else was out, right? So I caught the fury of them being out and Bishop being displeased. But one thing that it did for me, it helped me to grow. At that time, I was in Bible college, for I knew that if I'm going to do the work, that I must prepare myself. So I attended Bible college, and standing before Bishop Gilmore, the question was read about having school, formal schooling. And I told him, yes, sir, very proudly, I'm in Bible college. And he said to me that you need to get out of Bible college and you need to go to seminary. In my mind, I have a family, I'm working a real good job. And I'm thinking I'm doing the best that I can, but he pushed me to do more. And he said these words to me: doctors go to medical school, lawyers go to law school, and preachers go to seminary. I would never forget that as long as I live. And it was after that time that I sought forth to find a way to work, to go to school, and to raise a family. I started out at Southern Methodist University. With that experience, God led me, and I said within myself, the leaders of our church go to Phillips. So it was me transferring from Southern Methodist University and going to Phillips School of Theology, where I matriculated, and Dr. Skip was in that particular class, all while pastoring several churches along the way. Each particular church had its own characteristics, but one thing that people did is they taught me how to pastor. They taught me how to love. Oftentimes, as a pastor would go in and think that I have all the answers. I know what's going on, and sometimes treating each local church like the one you just left, each person like the one you just left, but only to find that people are different, and you have to love people right where they are, and God will take them to where God needs to take them. This particular picture here was us presiding elder and Dr. Roderick Lewis came and did a workshop for us on the Elberton Gainesville district. That within itself was truly a blessing. We had an opportunity to go to one of the local colleges and rent their auditorium, and the district came out. And so my journey to general officership began again at Fuse for the lack thereof of training or people saying anything else but happy. So we come, actually it was in 2014 where God began to birth in me the call to higher ministry. I didn't know what it was at that time, but I knew I needed to, kind of train myself and get ready. So upon the call, God made it crystal clear to me what it was. I sought out some counsel and asked people about what they thought about it. And at that particular time, it was not the time. So I waited, and I heard God said, now is the time. So then at that particular time, I did seek out counsel again, but I heard from God. So we went forward to enter my name on the ballot for General Secretary of Evangelism and Missions. Seeking to serve this church, the church I love, the church I grew up in, the church that I know, the church that did not know me. However, the church that will come to know me if given the opportunity. So it was at that point, Dr. Mason, that I had a slim chance. That's what I was told. You have a very slim chance. But I said, even a slim chance is a chance. And if God had called me to this position, then God will take care of it. Mm-hmm. So as you know, that in the General Conference of 2018, God saw fit, and a few people saw enough in me to give me a shot, to give me a chance. And it is because of that I sit before you now, humble, grateful, and just willing to do the work. Some of the things that we have done is, workshops. We've had an opportunity to travel. The first year was a year of exploration. That picture is the Breeden Montgomery Bible College. That's the primary school that they have. They were in class, and they were just such a great group of young people, and it's just been a blessing. And we look forward to the continued work. This here is Dr. Carmichael Crutchfield invited me to share. And I have to say something about this, the champion in life, Brother Charles Coney, who that particular night that I did the video, he had me do it at least about 15 times. It ain't right. It ain't right. It ain't right. He pushed me. It ain't right. You need to do it over. It ain't right. And I said, man, I'm going to bed. I'm tired. I said, I finish it in the morning. He said, I need it in the morning. I said, I'm finishing it in the morning. So in the morning, I got up and it went smooth. I sent it to him. He said, now this is right. And it's just been, an opportunity to build relationships across the church, build relationships that we may be able to be better as believers. Becoming a virtual, growing your church this Thursday, actually at 7 p.m. God had placed it in our spirit to do this particular piece. As you see the speakers, we want you to register. We don't do anything for numbers. We don't do anything for vainglory. It is not of me. Again, I go back to Fuse that day that the church kind of left me hanging because I was seeking something, and they found an opportunity to clap instead of teach. So I shared with the Lord, if God would give me a place, and I kind of lived this throughout life, if God would give me the opportunity to make things better, what I've seen I wouldn't do, I'll do it a little bit better. And that's all I try to do in ministry and in life, and in people we meet, leave them a little bit better. So thank you for this opportunity and this time to share. Yeah, that's it. That's what's up.
Well, thank you so much. And I'm going to ask the other guests, Dr. Pinkett, Dr. Crutchfield, to unmute yourselves because I have a few questions that I want to ask you, if you would. And I'm so glad to be back. If you all only knew what happened on this end, how does the host lose the camera and audio to his own show? I don't know either. I mean, I've had to switch computers in the middle of the show, but thank God for technology and all. But I heard every one of you while I was trying to work out the technical aspect. And to be very frank and honest, this has been so inspiring to me, you know, because sometimes in your capacities as general officers and, you know, we don't really, people who know you personally know, but we don't really get a chance to understand, how did you get to this position? You know, what is your backstory, your side story? You know, you just didn't show up at a general conference, you know, and put your name in the hat, or you've seen Dr. Pinkett, what was that, the agony of defeat, on many occasions with this ministry that was so passionate to your heart, yet you stuck it out. The thrill of victory and the agony of defeat, I think that was what the old ABC Sports saying was. And both, you know, Dr. Crutchfield, you've been on this role for 18 years, and Dr. Harris, an equal number of years as well. So let me ask this question. Do you feel as if your work is undervalued in the church? Now, don't give me the preachy holy answer. I'm doing this for God. Okay, we know that already. But do you feel sometime in this journey that the work that you do is undervalued? And if so, why? I mean, and we gotta have these honest conversations. If we're gonna move forward, you know, and do the work that the church has called us to do, that we got to be able to look at the reality of the truth. So anybody can jump in at this time.
Okay. It's easy for me to jump in on that. Absolutely undervalued. And the reason I believe that it's undervalued, I mean, the proof is in the fact of what we get paid. I mean, I think that's the proof of it. And at each general conference, I mean, I've been elected 5 times, and each time we are very low. As a matter of fact, probably anyone who was a pastor, I could say, was making more as a pastor than they were as a general officer. When they got elected general officer. So you didn't do it for money. So the thing I believe that the undervaluing comes is that oftentimes things that you're doing like now, Dr. Mason, you haven't done a good job of helping people to understand the work itself. I think sometimes, sometimes those in a leadership, for instance, I mean, that for sure, many of them, if not all of them, right now, only one of them has ever been a general officer. So they don't know what general officership really is about because they've never been there. And so I think that's part of the undervaluing of it. I think part of the fact is that sometimes when we are so concerned about keeping a budget low, so we sacrifice the people or the departments that really need money. I mean, for instance, I'll give an example. At our last general conference, we made an emphasis on evangelism, yet we cut the evangelism budget. So what kind of sense does that make? That shows the undervaluing and underappreciation of what the office holds, not necessarily for the individual. I mean, I don't take it personal. I think it's about the office and really understanding what the office does and the requirements to do it. So sometimes we don't. And I think the other part of that undervaluing is that we have, as in general, we haven't necessarily made general officership people. You have to have certain qualifications to do this. You just say anybody wants to jump in. And so when you do those kinds of things, you undervalue the position because you don't give it the emphasis that it needs. So that's my 2 cents worth.
I think, I think sometimes we can get caught up with the wrong thing. Our sole purpose is to win souls and make disciples. And from a financial space, I think it's a concern. But what we found in our ministry is that you have so much talent that's available in our churches. And for the first 2 years, I was seeking to find individuals that will commit and dedicate themselves to leadership to such a point that in collaboration with other Zions even, we have the same goal in mind, and that is to change the paradigm when it comes to men active in their churches. And by using the resources of our fellow Zions, AMEZ, the AME, the United Methodist Church Ministry departments, along with the CME Church, we developed a collaboration effort that we're using shared resources just to promote and develop. And the same thing is happening across the world. For some reason, there's not that much interest on getting men validated in ministry to the point of leadership and pouring into the resources that they could bring to the table. But I find it joy that we are seeing a turnaround. And if we continue to engage our young men and give them some of the travel ups and downs that we've had in life in such a way, it would help them become greater men. So, yeah. It's a concern to see more poured into our ministry, but in the utilization of all those resources of human capital, we're taking full advantage of those opportunities that we do have. And while I leave on this note, we had started a Pan Methodist Day of Prayer about a month ago, and this coming 31st, we'll be doing the same type. 4 denominations coming today for a noonday service of prayer. And through prayer, we've seen a lot of things change. So we're excited still about the potential and what this ministry has to offer for especially our Zion.
Thank you, Dr. Pinkett. Reverend Moore, Dr. Harris, either one of you want to chime in?
Yeah, sure. I'll chime in. Thank you. An excellent question. And let me repeat it just to make sure that I'm okay. You said, do we think that the position of the general officer is undervalued? Is that right?
Yes.
All right. It's a good question. I would say just getting here and hearing Dr. Crutchfield and seeing some of the examples, there's a great concern. It's a huge concern. But I would say the concern is built out of the internal workings of the church that we have enclosed ourselves in, that by enclosing ourselves in, sometimes we fail to see the greater value of what we do in society. I believe it was John Wesley who said that, the world is my parish. So that if we as the Christian Methodist Episcopal, more so the general officers of the church, not to look for esteem, don't get me wrong, but at least to look for opportunities to be come into collaboration with each other first, and then in collaboration with our Episcopal leaders, pastors, and our laity, There are moments when there are some places, some Episcopal districts you just can't share in, because that's just the way it is. And I think when we look within ourselves, we become microisms, if you will, of what God is calling us to be.
Mm-hmm.
So the value of the general officer must also be the value of the church. So if the church is valuing all of its persons, more importantly, like we're talking about the general officers, then we are representatives of the church. Then what does it say to the greater body, the ecclesia, about our church, the Christian Methodist Episcopal Church?
Mm-hmm. Great point. Great point.
My statement would not rest so much on undervaluing the general officer
Mm-hmm.
or the office of general officer, but because I represent the laity, then I see over the past 10 years that I've been in this office,
Mm-hmm.
seemingly, and this is based on what I see as support for lay ministry in the local church. Of course, the discipline says that every local church shall have a lay ministry council.
Right.
Nobody runs from one church to the other trying to beat anyone over the head and say that you need to form a lay ministry council.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But encouragement and support of laity within the local church is paramount. I look at our church as a tree, and a tree cannot live without the root. The local church is the root, and we must sustain and preserve and strengthen the root of the tree. No other part of a tree can live without the root or sustain itself. I see that we don't place as much emphasis on leadership at the local church level as I think we should at times.
Mm-hmm.
Let me put it this way. You know, and most of us know that in 2022, I'll retire.
Yeah.
I'll retire as a layperson. And I want to have a viable, effective church to continue to worship in.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm not going anywhere. But a lot of our emphasis and a lot of our energy it goes into strengthening the local church. And I believe that laypersons must understand what we need to do to help keep our church viable. Mm-hmm. And it starts with self-understanding and taking responsibility for what we are to do. Understanding and committing to discipleship. We talk about disciples and making disciples. Well, you can't make a disciple or help persons become disciples unless you're committed to it yourself. And intentional intergenerational ministry. You know, it doesn't just happen. In the first keynote address that we gave in Houston after we were elected, we talked about intentional intergenerational ministry, and that is all the generations within the church being situated to where one can benefit from the other. And I think that we must put much emphasis in that area if we're going to move forward. But I think that we have to get a good handle on how we support and sustain our local churches as we go forward. Because in many persons, let me just be honest, many persons don't attend meetings many times because of the financial strain. We've got to be aware that our seniors, when they get older, they can't do the same things that they did before. When they say they're living on fixed income, they are. There's no bonuses coming in. Social Security is social insecurity. And they might get a little raise every 2 or 3 years. But so we've got to be about doing those things within our planning processes that's certainly going to strengthen the local church and support laypersons.
Thank you. So by way, and this has just been so rich and so beneficial. So by way of, I guess, closing remarks, I want you all to talk about the future of the department that you are currently the general officer for. So, Dr. Harris, you have alluded to some of that, but what is the future, and what do you see yourself doing in the next 2 years? I don't know. You have mentioned, Dr. Harris, that you're coming out in 2022. Is anybody else coming out? Or Dr. Pinkett, you'll be retiring. And so we have 2 of our general departments that will have new leadership after 2022. And whatever they inherit lies within what you have now in terms of what you're trying to do. But helping the church, to understand the big picture, and does it come from the top down or from the bottom up or somewhere, in between. So I'm going to start with you, Dr. Crutchfield, as an 18-year veteran. I think, was it 18 years, I believe, yes, of the Board of Christian Education. What is the future of the Board of Christian Education? And let me just say this, and then I'll be through, because my concern is that the church in the small rural area needs to be as in tune with the ministries, Christian education, lay, ministry to men, evangelism, just as the church that's located at 560 Martin Luther King Jr. Drive, downtown Atlanta, as well. And if there's that disconnect, then we have some issues. So, Dr. Crutchfield, give us some thoughts, closing thoughts, if you will, on the Board of Christian Education, where we are now and where we're going. And then we will work our way through with you, my brother, Reverend Leon Moore, giving us your final thoughts on evangelism and missions.
There are a couple of things I want to say, and I want to concentrate on what that church you just described, Dr. Mason, the small membership church. And I make an emphasis, and you hear the word, that it's very important for me to call the small membership church the small membership church and not the small church. Each one of our churches has value. But I think the future, and there's a lot of things I can say about what I see the future. I mean, and I'll put this, try to be very succinct in this. I just finished doing a 2-hour class for my seminary on Sundays about the faith formation in the 21st century. And one of the things Dr. Harris alluded to earlier about intergenerational is certainly a major portion of that. Every Sunday, every week, whether it's small or large or whatever, or a region or whatever, we're 5 different generations. And how we deal and how we learn from each one of those generations will be paramount in our understanding of how church will move forward in the future. We cannot put so much emphasis on one generation at the neglect of the others. And I think that's what we have been doing for instance, by the year 2050, there will be the number of people will be 100 years old will have almost tripled. And here we are sometimes giving no emphasis to that ministry at that level. So you asked me something, I'm gonna put it this way. I think Christian education will always be needed, maybe with some reorganization, retweaking with organizationally concerned. But I see the future of Christian education still concerned itself with children, with youth, with young adults, and with this new category that I tried to introduce at the General Conference, emerging adults, this age group from 18 to 25 that needs special emphasis from the church. But we are so political sometimes that we don't see these things very well. Emerging adults, those who are in mid-adulthood, and those who are becoming seniors, all of those in an intergenerational way, but yet at the same time ministering to their particular needs and working with their particular needs. Keeping in mind that the key word in two words in Christian education is that one is Christian and the other is education. And education for me, and I use the word, I added the word formation because I really believe that the issue is being formed in Jesus Christ. When we're formed in Jesus Christ, there are 2 things that are happening. It was in today's church school lesson. We love God with everything, and we love our neighbor. And we begin to define our neighbor as somebody that we haven't always defined our neighbor as. Someone who is different from us, who is not in our ballpark, where their sexual orientation may be different, where their color may be different, where whatever might be difference about them. They may be homeless and we're not homeless. Whatever the case is, we have to identify with that neighbor. And what I just read just before I came on earlier is that the churches that are growing during this pandemic are the churches that are reaching out beyond their normal place, reaching out to people who they don't normally reach out to. And unless I see Christian education like I see the entire church, that unless we move beyond our sometimes closed-in vision of what the church is, we will be left behind like many other churches, denominations before, and not existing. And I see that some will not be able to survive or thrive. And so in that regard, and I'm a strong proponent for this, we have to look at the demographics, and we have to make decisions based on demographics that sometimes are painful decisions, but necessary decisions in order to help the church move forward in the 21st century. And I could go on and on with that, but I'm going to leave that alone and just stop right there because time is of essence right now. And
I appreciate that very much. And especially the understanding of that new category, if you will, the emerging adults, young adults. That's interesting. I like that. And hopefully at some other time we can expound and elaborate on that as well. Dr. Harris, you are retiring, coming out. What do you tell your predecessor as you leave? What do you put in his hands to say, here you go, good luck, wish you well, I'm headed to the islands for vacation? What do you tell that person who will come after you, and prayerfully one who is already engaged in the ministry? and working closely with you or have some understanding of it. What do you say?
I first think look to be a collaborator, not a competitor. That we cannot move forward. We cannot sustain ourselves even now unless we embrace a collaborative spirit, because none of us knows as much or can do as much as all of us.
Yeah.
And to be a communicator and build relationships. Leadership so many times is relationships, to the point that we reach out, we get to know individuals. They know us as genuine. We know them as genuine. Continue to work and communicate with the whole of the laos and the entire church, and make sure that the ministries that fall under the umbrella of lay ministry continue to be strengthened, and that the people feel equipped in relation to doing what they have been called to do. That and this whole thing with the pandemic has made sometimes what we do a moving target. I just got to thinking that we've been out of church since March, and if we out, we've got 5 months until again, and people will be a year older, and in many cases, if we were to start again in March, some churches would not be able to function because persons have gotten older. So as lay persons, we have to take our responsibility, whether it's during a pandemic or whether it's, and I don't know what we consider normal times anymore, but we have got to take our responsibility to doing what we can do and should do, using our talents, our gifts and graces to keep the church strong. We cannot depend or look to our pastors to do it all. That we have to have that spirit to do all that we can to keep the church viable and strong.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Dr. Harris. And commendations to you for the work that you have done. But you still got 2 years left. So it's not quite.
We aren't getting ready to go sit over in the corner.
That's right.
We're going to work until the end.
Yes, sir.
We act like a lame duck for the next 2 years.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, sir. Dr. Pinkett, live and in living color. You were black and white for a minute, but I'm glad you came back. This has been your baby for a long time, and now you are retiring and passing it. What do you tell the next General Secretary of Ministry to Men, and what is the future? You alluded to it a little, but help us to understand, in our 150th year, what is the future of the ministry to men?
Well, I can say this to any aspiring leader that's coming aboard or who's already present, there will be challenges, and not to be fearful. Just look at it as an opportunity to expand the kingdom. Even Jesus himself went through difficulty, but it didn't take a whole lot of persons to expand his ministry until it got ignited. I think the CME Church and the Department of Ministry, the men, has been igniting men across the world in our travels and in our dedication of servicing. But it's more than that, because God continues to provide us with human capital. As I travel, I see so many young men trying to find their way, talented, inspirational, knowledgeable, technical geniuses that we don't even think about tapping into as a church. And they're sitting right out there in our pews in most cases. If we don't engage them and allow them to pour back into the church their talents, why should they stay around?
Mm-hmm.
So I think our openness should be one that is trying to be targeted. And Dr. Crutchfield and Cliff mentioned the demographic aspect. Just look around us. We know what our individual settings are.
Right.
For instance, at Butler Street, we're in the process of building a new church during the pandemic.
Yeah.
And we're seeing an increase in membership, worship-wise, through virtual learning.
Excellent.
What that tells us is that whatever the future holds, God's church will still be here.
Yes.
We have to be flexible enough to go after our audience, which is the whole layoffs, if you will.
Right.
In the community where we decide to build or set our stake, don't limit yourself within a full wall capacity.
Mm-hmm.
Utilize the resources of some of the collaboration efforts that we have. And I would say to anybody that's coming along, the opportunity is there, but you have to be visible and engaged.
Mm-hmm.
Just as Cliff said, we're not going anywhere. We're lay people.
Yeah.
We'll be around even after retirement, looking for better growth in our church on all levels.
On all levels.
And I hope the church sees that way, that they are focused on developing more men with capabilities to do service for the Lord and kingdom.
Mm-hmm. Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. Thank you so much, Dr. Pinkett, for all your work and continued work. And Reverend Moore.
Thank you so much, Dr. Skip, for that question, because it's a very relevant question for the local church in the rural. I think one of the first things, what does it look like? What does the future look like? What does the future hold? What will I tell someone if I'm not sitting in this seat 2 years from now? I'll be very open, hopefully, prayerfully I am, but if not, I have to be loving enough and transparent enough to pass on any knowledge and information that can help that person be successful. I have to be able to engage in a way to put the church first. What is best for the church? Just like that local church, what's best, what's in the best interest of that local church? Once we find what's in the best interest of the local church, then if we're going to succeed, if we're going to be around another 150 years, we must lay the foundation of prayer. Prayer is extremely essential, because if you're asking us, but what does it look like to God? What does it look like to God? We can sit here and imagine an oasis, or we can sit here and imagine a desert. But what does God want from the Christian Methodist Episcopal Church? So if we're going to do something for God, we must seek God in prayer. And then after that, we must build for that particular local church. I believe every church can grow. And I say it again, I believe every church can grow. I don't care where you are. Every single church can grow. However, what type of growth are we looking for? We have to do partnerships. There are people, each church in every community, there's somebody in that community that may not be doing what God has gifted you to do. What God has gifted you to do, you join in with somebody else to what God has gifted them to do to empower that particular community. What about the church that has a pastor and 2 members? That pastor has people, and people are the resource. That 2 members have people, and people are the resource. We can partner with other denominations, with other corporations, look around in the neighborhood. But what if there's nothing in the neighborhood? God has something for that local church to do. I think what the church looks like, the church is on the epicenter of just bursting open. We appreciate great things that we're doing now. Do we not do some things that we need to tighten up? Yes, there are. But we're doing some great things, and we're a great church. Why is it that, and I'll close with this, why is it that when people leave our church or we hear they say, well, I used to be CME. Mm-hmm. And for me as a pastor, I've heard people say that. And then I say, well, let me see your worship program. And they set it up the same way and our structure set up. Mm-hmm. So we have a great church. There are some things we have to tweak. There are some things we have to get rid of. There are some things we need to tighten up. But most importantly, I think, Skip, in answering your question, 2 years from now, I hope to be here. But if not, I have to be a big enough man to know and to understand that God has chosen that person for this time to move it forward. And I must assist, and I can't hold back. Mm-hmm. That's the most important piece, even for that local church, even for pastors moving from one location to the next. How many pastors sometimes don't help support the next pastor? We'll read bad information, but, I made connection with the president of that corporation over there. He and his family sometimes walks in the church, or some information that would be useful for the local church, I think, is very prevalent in these times. And use, as Dr. Crutchfield said, as Dr. Harris said, as Dr. Pinkett said, use this platform, use what you have in order to go where you are.
Thank you so much, Reverend Moore and Dr. Pinkett, Dr. Harris, Dr. Crutchfield. Time flies when you are having fun listening to four of our distinguished general officers. I'm grateful. I've learned a lot about you and about the work that you do, and also the work that remains to be done in our beloved church that we love so dearly. I'm grateful to all of those who have watched. Delighted to see our Senior Bishop Reddick and Mrs. Reddick joined us today after another event, and other bishops who may be watching as well. We appreciate this and your time, and pray God's blessings on you. And Dr. Harris, while I have you, I would love to have a conversation with your 98-year-old father. Just to sit and listen to him talk about the church that he has seen over the past 80, 90 some years. I'm certain that would be quite a conversation. So would you work on that for me, please? I'd love to have that.
Yes, sir.
I would
You
love
got about
that.
you got about 5 hours?
Well, I can give them solid hours. But we're gonna make that happen.
Yeah, we'll do that. Let's talk.
Thank you so much, and let me get that banner off of your head. But we've had just a delightful afternoon. I could not ask for better. I had a great worship experience today, a great dinner. The Atlanta Falcons won his first game for the season, and I've spent an hour and 39 minutes with four of our distinguished general officers. It just doesn't get any better than that. On next Sunday at 5 o'clock, it will be my honor and pleasure to have a conversation with some of the remaining general officers, not included on this picture, Dr. Victor Taylor, but we're going to have Dr. Ori Spraggan, Dr. Panay Woods, Dr. Tyrone Davis, and Dr. Roderick Lewis. And so that should be quite an interesting gathering and conversation, and I'm looking forward to that as well. As you know, this is Breast Cancer Awareness Month, and we remind you as a part of what we do for outreach, amen, to be mindful of that and to share that. And by virtue of that, I am going to close out with this PSA that I've shared, as well as I shared with my congregation this morning, that my mother, 86-year-old mother, was recently diagnosed with breast cancer. And we are currently going through that phase with her. And so we solicit your prayers, but she is a strong woman of faith, a member of West Side community. But this has a face for our family now. And so this has become very important. God bless you all. Thank you so much. And we're going to close out with this PSA on breast cancer. And you all have a good rest of the evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Skip.
You're welcome. God bless you.
Right.